If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. But if he does not listen, take one or two others along with you, that every charge may be established by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Brothers and sisters, one of the greatest sources of division, hurt, and unnecessary conflict in the church today is our failure to obey Jesus' clear instructions on how to confront sin. Jesus lays this out very simply in 3 steps. Go to your brother privately. If he does not listen, take 1 or 2 others with you. And if he still refuses to listen, to take it to the church. This is not some suggestion or some good advice about how you should maybe consider doing this. This is a command. And yet, how often do we skip this steps 1 and steps 2, and jump straight into either step 2 or step 3, I should say? How often do we take something to the church leaders before we have obeyed Jesus in private? When we refuse to confront somebody directly, we sin against them, but we also sin against God. Instead of loving them enough to bring it to them, we choose to gossip about it under the guise of getting advice, or we choose to nurse our grievances and grow bitter. You'll see Paul in Titus follows the same pattern. He says, as for a person who stirs up division, after warning him once and then twice, have nothing to do with him, knowing that such a person is warped and sinful. He is self-condemned. So you'll notice that Paul is applying this same process of private confrontation first, and then bringing others, and then ultimately breaking fellowship if they refuse correction. James, in chapter 5, verse 19 through 20, says, my brothers, if anyone among you wanders from the truth, and someone brings him back, let him know that whoever brings back a sinner from his wandering will save his soul from death and will cover a multitude of sins. So our goal here, as we confront people in their sin, our goal is always restoration. It's not exposure, it's not winning an argument, it's about winning a brother or sister back to Christ. This kind of faithful confrontation needs to be trained and established in us through starting in childhood. We need to be teaching this to our children every day as we go through life. And you parents of young children know there are lots and lots of opportunities every day to deal with sin and conflict in the home. So children, if your brother or sister takes your toy away or refuses to play fair, what should you do? It's a pop quiz. Before running to mom or dad, Jesus says that you must go to them first. Gently and clearly say, Johnny, it was wrong that you took my toy like that, and it hurt my feelings. Can you make it right? And parents, when Susie skips that step and comes straight to you, commit to teaching her to follow Jesus' process. Instead of stepping in as judge and jury immediately, you might say something like, it sounds like Johnny was rude, but it looks like you have other toys. Can you let love cover this one? So you have those 2 options, right? You have the option to let love cover it, or you have the option to encourage the child to go directly to them first. Unfortunately, this isn't just a lesson for children. This happens all the time in the church. A friend or spouse comes to you, hurt by something somebody said or did. So what should you do as an adult? Well, again, you have 2 biblical options. The first is to encourage them to let love cover it. So if somebody comes to you and tells them something, you can say, point them to Proverbs 19:11, which says, good sense makes one slow to anger and is a glory to overlook an offense. Or you need to encourage them to speak with the person directly and hold them accountable to doing that. Proverbs 27:6 says, faithful are the wounds of a friend, profuse are the kisses of an enemy. So you have an opportunity when somebody comes to you and says, this person is doing this thing and I think it's wrong, or it's offended me, or they've hurt my feelings. You have an opportunity to encourage them, hey, be a faithful friend. Go talk to them about it. And, profuse are the kisses of the enemy, but faithful are the wounds of a friend. A true friend doesn't indulge in gossip and doesn't encourage bitterness. A true friend lovingly calls their brother or sister to obey Jesus and to seek restoration. And even when we do confront sin, so we need to do this, but when we do it, there's a right way to do it. Galatians 6:1 tells us, brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore them in a spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you be tempted. So you have to be spiritual. You have to be in a place of spiritual self-control and maturity so that you can do this with gentleness and humility. So if you're not, if you're doing this in pride or bitterness, then you yourself are not qualified to go do this step. So you have to deal with your own sin first. And then, of course, we have to do it kindly. 2 Timothy tells us that, and the Lord's servant must not be quarrelsome, but kind to everyone, able to teach, patiently enduring evil, correcting his opponents with gentleness. So there needs to be gentleness. So before you confront someone with sin, and again, this is something we have to do, this is something we need to do, it's part of our Christian duty, but here's a good couple of questions to ask yourself. Am I confronting this person because I'm in the grip of jealousy or bitterness or anger? Do I want this person to be restored? Do I actually want them to repent? Do I just want them to feel embarrassed, or do I just want to feel superior? When I confront them, will I be relieved if I find out through that process of confrontation that I was wrong, or will I be disappointed? Unfortunately, it's just far more common in our church that we just don't do this at all, that we fail to confront sin when we ought to. But here, Hebrews chapter 3, verse 13. But exhort one another every day, as long as it is called today, that none of you may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. This is not just a general Christian duty that we have. This is a vow that we make, that we just made. We all just did this. Remember the vows we just made to the Olivers and to the children who were baptized. We promised to assist these parents in the Christian nurture of these children and to support them in blessings and trials and to exhort them to live godly lives before Jesus. So we promised as a church just now, we all promised we're going to do this for these children and for the Oliver family. And we've done that for every person here. Well, of course, in the Bible Belt, we all know about the 11th commandment, thou shalt be nice. And as Vodi Bakum says, the other 10 don't count. But there is a commandment that's relevant here. It's the 9th commandment, which forbids bearing false witness. The 9th commandment, we tend to kind of simplify that to just mean don't lie. The 9th commandment is just don't lie, but it's actually much more than that. There's a lot more going on there. We must refuse, if we care about the 9th commandment about bearing false witness, then we must refuse to hear or to repeat a report about someone else unless this process of first going to the person directly has been followed. So when you get that advice about Joe's concerning sin, when you hear it, before taking it to him first, or when you go to your friend to get advice about Joe's sin, but before you've actually gone to Joe, you fail to give him the opportunity to explain. Perhaps you mistook his actions for sin because you didn't know some important context. Remember what Proverbs 18 says, the one who states his case first seems right until the other one comes and examines him. So when someone skips Jesus' first step and comes to you with a complaint, now you are confronted with two sins. You've got to deal with, you've been confronted with about someone else's sin, but you've also got the sin right in front of you of the person who is bringing it to you before they've gone to that person directly. And so now you, in that situation, if you're the one who someone's coming to get advice from, now you have a biblical responsibility. You must not engage in the sin, in their sin, but you must break this cycle and handle it biblically. Imagine if every time someone in our church brought a complaint about someone else to you, if the response that every time this happened in our church, that the response was, well, I think we should pick up the phone right now and let's call that person. Imagine how quickly that would break this habit that we have of gossiping and of not dealing with sin directly. So I know this is a hard word. I know this is hard work. It's scary. It's scary to confront people. It requires real, meaningful relationships that go deeper than Sunday morning pleasantries. So I've heard Steve Wilkins say that in order to be in a place to confront someone at sin, you have to actually know them well enough to know how they're going to respond, right? And that's a good test. How many people in our church do you know well enough to know how they would respond if you confronted them about their sin? And if it's not very many, then we've got to get down to the important work that we've talked a lot about of hospitality. We've got to get to know each other and be in each other's lives more than just the pleasantries before and after church. God blesses obedience. This is hard. This is a really hard thing to do. We get opportunities, all of us, every single day in our home. So there's lots of opportunities to practice with the people that are closest to you, that love you. But God blesses this obedience. In Deuteronomy 28, it says, "If you faithfully obey the voice of the Lord your God, being careful to do all his commandments, the Lord your God will set you high above all the nations of the earth, and all these blessings shall come upon you and overtake you if you obey the voice of the Lord your God." So let us commit to this hard work of Christian living and trust God to bless us. This reminds us of our need to confess our sin. So as we do that and prepare our hearts, let's sing hymn 351.